Welcome. This video highlights work from recent studios in the Master of Architecture program at Taubman College. We will hear from 3 current M.Arch students sharing their projects from Proposition Studio. This is an advanced option studio that students take in the fall of their final year before completing their thesis. These are often the most experimental design studios, exploring ideas and approaches that may be highly interdisciplinary. They may connect to other cultures and geographies, or they may go deep on some specific architectural question. Every year, there's a new array of topics and methodologies that faculty bring to their studio offerings: computational design, adaptive reuse, resilient urbanisms, housing, and more. So within this plurality, students can align their own interests and build up their knowledge and design capacities within a particular arena in the discipline. So today we're going to see 2 projects from 2 different studios. Talia will go first. Talia Morison-Allen is in her 3rd and final year of the 3-year program. She will present her project from Professor Julia McMorrough's studio.
Hello. Okay, I'll just share my screen. Oh, wait. Sorry, I'm just gonna share. Okay. So my studio with Julia McMorrough was called House of the Future. Um, the site was located in Jeromesville, Ohio, on Highway 30. This highway, which runs right below this small town, has a lot of these model homes, which are construction companies build like a model house for families to come visit, and then the construction company can go build that house for them within the Midwest in the surrounding area. So we were looking at these kind of traditional homes um, that have kind of have these customizations inside of them, have these floor plans, and they're kind of based on this history of building and how home construction in the US. And so we were looking at the history of home building in the US and in the world in general. The catalog of homes, the Sears Roebuck home, you might have heard of before, but there's this long history in the US of building model homes, of having kind of magazines of customizations that you can kind of use to change your floor plan or kind of customize your house to fit yourself. But for the most part, it's kind of like pick a house out of a magazine. And then we're also looking at The House of the Future by Allison and Peter Smithson, which was kind of embracing the new innovations in the 1950s and 60s, the invention of plastic. They were kind of imagining a future that required almost like a bunker style house, but the house could also kind of offer every sort of new technology and advancement for you. For example, here the table would sink into the floor. The spaces were very adaptable. And then we were also looking at architectural houses designed by famous architects. 3 of the ones that I was specifically diving into were the Orinda House by Charles Moore, the Y2K House by OMA, and then the Moriyama House by Sana. Um, and these houses, I think 3 of the things I was really looking at were the division of space in unique ways. Here are these kind of tent-like structures, the views of the exterior and this kind of central hall space, and then these really curated views of the sky. So Julia's approach within the studio was through iteration and development. So we actually ended up designing 10 different houses, but I'm only showing 3 today, well, 4 technically, that were kind of working to influence each other as they went along. Her approach of teaching is to kind of give us a lot of limitations and see how creative we can be within that. So here she asked us to design a roundhouse. within a suburb or within like a very specific plot of land. And so I was interested, I was looking at circles, but I was also interested in this kind of twist. As you're inside of the house, what does that twist look like as you walk through it? The next house was the Solowit house. So she asked us to take one of our last house designs from the previous week and then figure out how to interestingly place Solowit wall drawings within the house. And so I felt like these curves and twists were really interesting ways to display these very long wall drawings by Solowit. And then the next week, we were looking at Alan Wexler's work. He's an architect and kind of concept artist who builds really funky chairs and amongst other works. And so his picket fence furniture I thought was really interesting. And so I designed a kind of suburban house, thinking about kind of what kind of commentary he was giving about picket fences by building in tables and chairs and furniture into these fences. And then also these ruled surfaces, the lines of the picket fence influenced further the twist of the house and gave it kind of a surface material. Um, and that's where it came to the kind of final house, the plot twist house. Has a twist and it's built on a farm plot. So I was trying to think a little bit about the construction technology of this house. There's this really sculptural twist in it, which is also a very difficult construction. And so I was thinking, okay, so there's this central construction made out of steel, probably. But then on the ends, you have a really typical stick frame construction of just a kind of a shed roof. And so I was thinking about the interiors being laid out so that that in center area would have the like main living spaces, and then the exteriors would be easily renovatable, easily customizable, kind of able to adapt for future use. So just to kind of lay it all out, you've got this open floor plan, kitchen, dining, living, with a little loft above. And then you've got the bedrooms upstairs on both sides. There are two stairwells to access these, and then a garage, and a den, and some like pantry space. Um, this little box that's like lifted up is a little bit a reference to the Moriyama house and also to the interesting curvature that's created by the twist. The floors are lifting up into walls. So kind of created this framed space right there. And then there's a fun little circular lap pool in the center outside. Looking into this is the ground floor, and the upstairs. And then, so the other aspect of kind of a model home or a catalog home is to have offer customizations um, to the client. And so Julia asked us to consider possible customizations to this house. And so I was thinking about it as like who would want to live in this kind of like weird sculptural house? Maybe they're an artist. Or maybe they're just like someone who likes the curvature of the house, but they have like a parent or someone living with them or an adult child who might need like their own kind of bedroom suite. And then I was also offering the art studio and then this fun pool in the center. And then just a section cut to give you a little bit of an understanding of what that curvature is looking like with that boxed out living room space. And then a couple of views. I was looking at the work of, oh gosh, I'm so sorry, I'm forgetting his name.
David Hockney.
Yeah, David Hockney. Yeah, I was looking at the work of David Hockney, who was really looking at everyday life in California and trying to depict like moments in everyday life. And so I was inspired by that with these three sections, kind of looking toward outside toward the pool, looking from the kitchen to that living room space, and then upstairs, you get to see a little bit of the house. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you, Talia. You can keep your screen up for a minute. I really enjoyed hearing about the project. I hadn't seen it, although I knew the concept of Julia's studio, but I think it's really fascinating how it comes back to the initial model homes and the way that these representations, the house becomes more of a set or almost like a like scenography for, a kind of particular depiction of domestic life. But you're also working on the house as like a construction proposal, thinking through, how you would build it. So I really like that range of seeing the house as kind of a physical thing, but also kind of seeing the house as something that stages, domestic life. Um, I'm wondering, for you, like, in my introduction, I was saying that propositions happens before thesis, and sometimes students are working on ideas that are present in their thesis and sometimes not. And I'm just curious, what from this studio do you think you're taking forward with you? And, maybe it's not so much the topic, but are there things in the kind of process, in the iteration, or in the research that you feel like have kind of helped you or made you approach your thesis differently?
Yeah, I think one thing that was really fun about this, because a house is so small, you can
Hmm.
really start to design it around like a perspective. Um, like an imagined, I think in some of these initial houses, I think especially this one, kind of looking at those views through the twist was really when I felt like I was understanding the house. And then also like working through this drawing, like this depiction, specific depiction of the house was helpful for like the physical design, so the representation was almost just as important. And I think that came from the catalog home as well, because it was all
Hmm.
about these representations of the house as well as like the final product.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I think I'm continuing to think that way in my design process. Um, this, for my thesis, I'm doing kind of a mental health clinic, which involves inpatient care and housing. And I think the reason I took this studio was because I've worked at residential firms in the past. I have some interest in housing and just like find it really fascinating to think about how many different ways people live. And so in my thesis, I think I'm thinking about it at a broader scale in some
Yeah.
ways. Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. I see. Yeah, there's a kind of subjectivity or like thinking about the occupants of the house. And in this case, it's, maybe more of a singular house, but you can apply that process or lens to thinking about multiple subjects or, housing multiple people. So yeah, I can see that connection. Well, thank you so much, Talia, for starting us off. We will shift to the second project. So Jack Smith and Roman Marra are both in their second year of the 2-year or advanced placement program. And they're going to present their work from the Proposition Studio taught by Professor Anya Sirota. Okay, you guys can take it away.
Yep. So our project was focused on a building in Detroit's Midtown Cultural District, the Horace H. Rackham Education Building. And this is an old engineering building located just across the street from the art museum there, the Detroit Institute of Arts, and the library. And here's just kind of a closer satellite photo of the existing school at the parking garage. And our semester really started with us studying a lot about what the Rackham building was, and then that the cultural campus and where it sits in Detroit. And we documented a lot with drone footage, and cameras on the ground. And then we were really just trying to learn about Detroit through three different lenses, one of which being the cultural biography, which I was on this team, and we studied a lot of Detroit's history, starting from kind of like the late 18th century to present day. And we mapped a lot of different projects from institutional to community and experimental based projects that made quite a big impact on Detroit's image throughout the past century.
Yeah, and so a big part of this project was understanding some of these processes too of like materiality. And so why Jack looked at the cultural lens, my kind of lens was looking at the material biography. And so again, we wanted to explore those type of stories, stories of labor, stories of how materials transported. And so the images that you're seeing here are kind of 2D representations taken from historical photographs and kind of animating these so we can better understand how the building is kind of constructed and coming together.
Yeah. And then once we kind of finished our biography, learning about Detroit and learning about the history of the Rackham building, we went on a 1-week trip to Paris where we studied 18 specific adaptive reuse projects scattered all around Paris, which we then kind of studied and took images and documented throughout the week. Here's some examples of the projects that we visited. And when we returned, we took a lot of inspiration from these projects and our existing studies on Detroit, and then started to actually work on the building and apply some of these ideas on how we want to handle the future of Rackham.
Yeah, and so in the diagram here, what you can kind of see is what we, from these precedent studies and these visits in Detroit, one of the biggest like portions of the Rackham building was the parking garage. And so in our studies, we noticed in Paris that a lot of adaptive reuse projects have elements of subtraction and addition. And so in the image here, what you're seeing is this large parking garage in the back being literally split, taking those ideas of subtraction and kind of creating new additions through public life and plazas is what we're kind of thinking here.
Then with the subtraction, we're also introducing bioswales and just new natural environment to the existing site, as well as a new circulation through the core of the building.
And so in that spirit of subtraction and addition, the image that you're seeing here is kind of turning one of those parking garages that you'd seen previously in the drawing into an actual gallery and kind of like a space where people can exhibit work. Our idea for Rackham was to turn the program into this kind of new media center. And so we wanted to host this kind of program in these parking garages because instead of just tearing them down and using them as storage for cars, well, we wanted to rethink the program and think of something like, well, what if we begin to encase these parking garages with like, you know, certain materials that are transparent, and we can create gallery spaces. We can create places that, you know, were previously used for cars, but now can be used for humans. And so this rendering is kind of showing that visualization of life in this kind of new media domain.
Yeah. And then with what we did with the parking garage, we were also looking at the interior of Rackham, and we were searching for spaces that we could potentially create new double height spaces to improve programming. So here's an example of kind of like a theater workshop that would be visible to the public, and it's also kind of an always active workspace within the building.
And you know, we've shown a lot of subtraction. So in the previous image, we saw subtraction of the floor, kind of creating that double height space. We also want to talk about additions. And so the image that you're seeing here is a kind of a Core 10 structure that we actually placed on top of the parking garage. We named this the Crown. This would, again, give more life, more space for exhibition, technology uses. And so we kind of created this Core 10 perforated panel, which creates this really nice, in the interior, this kind of moment where you walk in and it's almost like you're looking at the stars in a way. And so kind of creating that kind of relationship was something we pulled from Paris and the idea of addition. And the biggest part I'd say is, you know, we can use so much of the digital domain and we can use so much of the digital realm, but how about testing the waters with modeling? And so we actually created these like 4-scale models. And again, you can see that perforated panel and that kind of polycarb which wrapped the parking garage. And so we wanted to be experimental and really kind of play around with how these structures would actually look. And so we physically modeled these ideas and we were able to create a lot of different moments.
Yep. And this is an example of us looking specifically at reliefs and kind of how they ornament a building, taking inspiration from the Palace de Tokyo, which is one of the buildings that we visited in Paris. And so here's kind of some process work, just studying at kind of relief designs and what we wanted to potentially place on the building. It was taking a lot of inspiration from kind of the industrial culture of Detroit and also the experimental culture of Detroit. And then that is it for the Repair Manual Studio. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you go back one slide? I enjoy looking at the relief and the process of designing the relief. Thank you guys so much. I really, I think, kind of where you ended discussing how this kind of strategic adaptive reuse of an existing building requires you to negotiate like a real material, a material reality, right? That you can measure and look at and visit. But there's also this very like imaginative component of how do you negotiate that material reality with a culture that's changing. So I kind of see a lot of the design. There's an idea about, making strategic moves, but also allowing for culture to fill in or change over time. I'm wondering, maybe this is a difficult question, but both of you are 2G students, so you came here with, an architecture background. I'm just wondering, like, in what ways did this studio introduce new approaches or new perspectives or just something that you hadn't experienced before in previous studios? If maybe each of you can speak to that.
Yeah, I can start. One of the things that I would say is what Anya was really like focused on is we went to Paris and we saw all these kind of adaptive reuse interventions, and they were wonderful. But then we come back and we have to realize, well, the codes are different, and so how we were attacking the situations was quite a challenge, because it's like you would see these precedents of, oh my gosh, I want to do something like this. But you have to, I think some of the challenge was like for Jack and I, is we had to kind of, look at things through a different lens and understand that, okay, while the codes are different, that shouldn't limit us. And so with interventions like the reliefs and like these additions and subtractions, I think we pulled from those precedents of Paris, and kind of with our, our different skill sets, we were able to kind of merge, the ideas from Paris. And, I think that was just something we were kind of looking at. So,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For me, the big takeaway from the studio was just actually learning about the history of the building and understanding kind of its place and as an engineering school, and then also the kind of the underlying history of Detroit as this building lived for the next 60 years, and then has remained vacant. So that really stuck out to me, is how this building on Detroit's cultural campus, it's quite a prominent building and it has a lot of space to be used, but it's been vacant. And so it was really nice for me to kind of get my head out of like a technical architecture space, and think about the city as a whole, do more urban analysis, and understand how this building, which seemed to fail maybe a little bit in the past, fitting into the city, how it could better now support the cultural district, and plug into current events that are going on now. So
yeah. I mean, those are really big and difficult questions, but I think they're very, relevant to, a lot of what architects are thinking about today, and the kind of problems that I think, your generation of designers are going to be working on. Well, thank you both, or all of you, all three of you, for sharing your work. It was really a pleasure for me to learn about your projects, and thank you. Hope to see you soon.